Blessings, Hatep and Ma'at. That means I'm offering you truth. Welcome to Navigating Eternity, our ancient astrology live stream series. I'm Aust Neferka, and this is my beautiful co-host, Danny Gazi. And for those of you, if it's your first time here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're here with us live, feel free to engage with us in the chat. We're live every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the channel so that way you get notified and you can see whenever we're going to schedule a live stream. So you can be part of the talk show if you're here with us live. Also, feel free to comment if you are watching the replay or the RAflect, as we like to say over here. I want to pass the mic off to Danny to just introduce yourself for those who are in our listening audience who might be the first time here and may not know who you are.
Blessings. My name is Danielle. I am a multidimensional artist and an astrologer, and I'm here to facilitate in the return to oneness and to be a beacon of authenticity. That's what I'm doing here.
Good, thanks. So, and for those who don't know me, I'm Aust Neferka. I am the mother of Tehuti Ma'at, and Danny and I are here in the capacity of Coins and Karis, which is one of our cooperative ventures for the revolutionary instrument of Tehuti Ma'at. Tehuti Ma'at focuses on creating revolutionary cooperative institutions in the areas of healing, art, and education, and Coins and Karis is our platform for our spiritual tools and services. So as Danny said, she's an astrologer. She offers her readings on there. I'm a healing artist. I'm also a spiritual warrior, revolutionary. I'm a farmer, and I'm also an oracle. So you can also check out Queens and Karis if you'd like to book any spiritual consultations or if you'd like to book an oracle reading with me as well. Today, Danny and I have titled our episode, Beauty is in the Eye of the Beholder. We've all heard this phrase before, so we're really going to dig into it because what we're really going to focus on is the ancient astrology, the ancient African interpretation and origins of the astrology that we are moving through right now. And the main transit, which is just movement celestially that we're going to be focusing on today, is Heteru, which is what most of us know as the energy sphere or planet of Venus, and how many have heard that the planet of Venus, and we've touched on this in our previous episodes, so definitely check out the description and you can check out the other episodes that we've done before. And before we transition to YouTube, we actually did a couple of episodes, I think 4 or 5 episodes on our Instagram. So if you are interested in any of that, then you can also follow the Tehuti Ma'at Instagram because the videos are archived in the Reels, and you can click on the playlist for Navigating Eternity. So that being said, most people have heard that Venus has been retrograde in Leo, and the ancient interpretation of this energy is Heteru is retrograde in Secondment. Okay, so we've talked about what these energies represent, but I'm going to allow Danny to just kind of illustrate the energetics of what this energy transit is and what we've been moving through, how long we've been moving through it, so you can kind of pay attention and just reflect back on what has happened in that time. And we're going to talk about how this energy signature is actually going to continue to impact us and show up because of the work that has happened through the retrograde cycle. Now, I also want to mention that Danny and I have been working on our Kemetic Zodiac course. So this is actually going to be an online course. It's going to be an extension of our Navigating Eternity course. If you're interested in learning about that, then you can click the link in the description to Tehuti Ma'at Academy, and you can actually enroll in Navigating Eternity, which is an online course. It's an energy management system. So it's all about orienting us to the solar cosmic clock. So getting us out of the Gregorian calendar and the Eurocentric linear time paradigm and restoring us back to our ancient cosmic perspectives and aligning us with natural cycles. And that way we can actually organize our lives in order to be more efficient with our energy. So that being said, Danny, can you talk about what we've been moving through with this retrograde in particular with Heteru?
Yes, so with Heteru, also known as Venus, um, something that I think helps us synthesize what Venus actually does is looking at the glyph. It's obviously the Greek glyphs, but the glyph for Venus is a mirror. So Venus represents exchange on all levels, whether that's exchange with oneself or exchange with another person. It's about what we magnetize towards us and what we're drawn to. So when we're seeing this energy through the filter of Leo or Secondment, Secondment has to do with the vital force, right? When we think of Leo, we think of the sun. We think of it's the energy of Leo is the reason why everyone knows our sun signs, right? We place emphasis on the light, what radiates. So it's what we can see. Um, and Venus in Leo is about what is radiating from the heart, because Venus is essentially our love language and how that manifests in all the different areas of our life. So where you have your Venus, or when we experience the cosmic transits, where Venus is at, it influences the way that we receive love and the way that we give love. And now this energy has been retrograde since I believe like June. I feel like it went retrograde on your birthday, maybe June 12th or June 11th, I remember. Or maybe that's when it went into Leo and then it retrograded a few weeks after. But it's been retrograde, and retrogrades essentially slow the energy down. So we know that when things are slow, they're more potent because they leave residue and they engage us with more presence. So the slower we move, the more impact we can have. And it also allows us to go inward. So retrograde energies are about turning inside. So with Venus inside, we've all been reevaluating what love means for us, but also looking at the unique way that we express our love language. Because when we're talking about the access of Secondment and Happy, Leo and Aquarius, we're talking about what it is that distinguishes us from the collective and what connects us to the collective, right? So what is it that your love language encompasses, and do you allow the full expression of this authentically, or are you on the journey to figuring out what that feels like, how you would like to express that, what you have to learn, what tools you need to adapt in order for you to do this more freely? Because when we're talking about the sun and the placement of Venus, right, Venus in Leo wants to highlight its love. It wants to show off its love. It wants its love to be seen. It wants it to be, we're talking about the rising sun, right? So when Venus is there, what magnetizes us in love is what is radiating. So this energy has had us all collectively just thinking about what it is that we are magnetized towards and why. And is it heart centered? Did it come from the heart, or does it come from, because the shadow expression of Secondment energy, of course, is, I don't want to say vanity. I feel like that's the shadow expression of Venus, but the shadow expression of Secondment is self-centeredness, right? So it's like wanting everything to be looking at you. So although that is the honesty of what the energy can do, because it's the sun, right? You think about the sun is in the sky, everyone's looking at the sun because it's our source of light. But at the end of the day, when it comes to our love language, sometimes being seen is not all that you need. Sometimes you need different things in order to have your emotional or whatever different areas of your life, that fulfillment met. And it isn't necessarily about what is visible to the eye. So I think collectively we've all been in a re-evaluative period, asking us whether we know how to communicate love from a heart-centered place, And if we don't know how to do that authentically, what is it that needs to be stripped back, or what tools do we need to develop in order to do that freely so that we can feel so that we can fulfill that inner child's love language, because that's what Secondment goes back to too, the inner child. So it's the purity of expression and the sustenance of the self and what the self truly desires to express. And we learn that when we're children, because we all come in with the coding already. We are the way we are, and we experience the things that shape us to be who we're going to be. So, looking at the inner child and the things that it's been taught as far as love, the type of love that it's received, and if the inner child even knows love, so that now we can recalibrate, being honest about
Okay.
what we truly want.
Yeah. And before I water your wisdom, I want to ask you, how would you describe the access of Sekhmet and Hapi, right? And Sekhmet is Leo. For those who haven't watched our previous episodes where we touched on this, again, the course is really going to go into detail and really be very comprehensive and practical and step by step, so you really can grasp the interpretations from an ancestral perspective. But that access, because one of the things that we touched on in our earlier episodes, because one of Danny and I's intentions is to really make the astrology and the astronomy accessible and practical, so that you really connect with it, because that's the whole point, is to actually recognize that these energies are all indwelling within us. They're not pieces and parts of things. So it's that integration process of recognizing that everything is whole. So ancestrally, we always looked at things in the context of their complementarity. So you always had, for each force of nature, there was a masculine and a feminine counterpart or complement to that energy. So when we look at the astrological pie, so to say, the 360 degrees of the zodiac, we are dealing with these accesses. So we don't talk about just Sekhmet energy independently, because we know that the other side of that and the complement to that is the Hapi energy, that Aquarius energy. So what would you describe? Because, we talked about some of the different aspects of the different accesses, but for this particular one, right, this Sekhmet and Hapi, this Leo and Aquarius access, what would you say it governs? Like, what is the main theme of what both sides of the coin speak to?
So, I want to use medical astrology to put this into reference for everyone to understand, because we all have bodies. I described in the previous episode how I tie medical astrology into my services when it comes to looking at the natal chart. But Leo represents the physical heart, right? That's what it governs over as far as our medical constitution. So Leo is the vital force beating from the center of our body, right? So it's that rhythm, that heartbeat that teaches us who we are and guides us towards what we truly love. While Aquarius, Happy, is the blood circulation happening from the heart. So it's our blood circulation going to all the different parts of our body, so that the heart can inform the movement of the actual full body. So the way that I think that that manifests collectively amongst us in archetypes, as far as like how we embody Sekhmet and Hapi, is that Leo teaches us who we are, and Aquarius teaches us who we are amongst others,
So it's
right?
the access of purpose.
Exactly.
Because one Sekhmet energy is going to be more self-centered, right? Because remember, the sun is the center of our solar system. And then, like, I love what you said about the circulation, because Hapi, literally, the interpretation of Aquarius, the water bearer, is literally the river that most of us know as the Nile being the longest river on the planet, but also the only river to flow from south to north. So it's a very significant current. And flow of water on our planet. So it's interesting that you said it was like that circulation, because when you're thinking about a river and water, it has to flow, right? So it's significant because Happy is not the personal side, but it's that humanitarian side. It's our collective responsibility, but how we still honor who we truly are, which is the balance of the other side, is making sure you're showing up authentically, because each energy has its extremes on either side. It could be underemphasized or overemphasized. And the goal is to really be centered in the energy and have that balance, right? So that being said, I wanted to water some of the wisdom of what you said with the ancient interpretation, right? So when we're talking about heteru, you were talking about beauty, essentially. And until you come back, oh, there you are. So heteru, the glyph in Meruneter, right? The like actual hieroglyph for heteru, or symbol that's most commonly associated with heteru, is the cow's horns. So usually when you see her personified in human form, she's wearing the crown of the horns with the solar disk, right? So this is representing all of the energies, all of the forces are all connected. So technically, when you're dealing with any of the feminine neteru, right? And when I say neteru, it's pretty much the aspect of nature, right? That force of nature. So the entire totality of the divine, right? This God element, right? The one, the all encompassing, everything that exists and nothing, is neter. But when you're talking about different aspects of it, like the sun, for example, Ra, or the wind, Shu, right? Or Geb, the earth. These are different aspects of the divine. And those are called, because they are plural, the term would be neteru. And it's actually interesting to note that neteru are really similar to what people in the Western terms would consider to be angels, because they were the first depictions of these personified forms with wings, right? Usually shown with falcon wings. So these are divine forces in the way that people would think of angels. And the essence of how we look at that ancestrally is to recognize that that divinity can be embodied by us. It's not something outside of us. It's all permeating around us, through us, in the universe. But it all depends on your resonance and your frequency, which is really what I think the key of the beauty in the eye of the beholder, because it's really, in essence, showing you that it really depends on what resonates with you, right? Like what frequency you're on. So if you're vibrating at a low frequency and you're operating in a lot of density, then you're probably going to be possessed by dense entities, right? Or like demons, right? Demonic forces. You're not dealing with angelic forces at that point, right? But if you're dealing with a higher frequency and your energy is light, then you're able to resonate with higher frequency energy, right? So it's really just about energy. I use the terms demon, angels, just to show those are symbolic interpretations and words that we've been programmed to characterize in a certain way. But we have to think about the neutrality of energy. It's really about the density of the energy, if it's heavy or light, right? It's not better or worse or good or bad. Essentially, it's just, where are you operating vibrationally? Because the foundation of our whole universe is vibration. So this is the fundamentals we have to return to, because all those layers of stains on our minds can prevent us from actually aligning and comprehending ancient astrology, because we're trying to interpret it with stained notions and concepts that we have to really eliminate and go to the pure essence of where we were ancestrally when we were observing and interpreting these energies. So that's the fundamentals that we have to look at. So when we're talking about heteru, the energy of Venus, Danny was speaking in terms of beauty. And what heteru is, because most people would interpret it like, a lot of people know heteru from the Greek, which is called Hathor, right? It's very important for us to return to the ancient original language of our African ancestors. Because if we're using Greek terms, we're literally, it's deeply insulting, because we're talking about the enemies of our ancestors who literally ransacked the place, right? And tried to completely override and parasitically adopt all of our ideas and concepts without even giving credit, right? Because every time we learn in schools today, they'll tell you, oh, Hippocrates is the father of medicine, and this person is the father of math. And they don't tell you that these Greeks and Romans sat at the feet of Africans for years to learn the little that they got to learn from them. Okay, because we're talking about a depth of study that our ancestors had that was deeply spiritual, deeply holistic, and lifelong. Right? The temples were the universities. And when we talk about the mystery system, or even what they've adopted nowadays as Freemasonry, right? You have 33 degrees, but ancestrally, where they took that from, there were way more than 33 degrees of knowledge. So we're talking about people who went to school, like, okay, you can go to school now and get a PhD. That's nothing compared to an ancestral legacy where people literally were in school damn near their entire lives, especially if it was someone who was in a position of priest or priestess, high priestess. You're talking about that level of devotion. So it's really, really deep knowledge. So we got the surface of that. When we look at the Greek interpretations, we're looking at the surface level of knowledge, which is great for superficial application. But where our planet is moving right now, where the consciousness is expanding. So our capacity and the need for us to actually be able to deepen our roots is very, very essential for us to be able to move forward, because the planet is transforming, it's changing. So we have to be able to go deeper. So what we're doing is trying to like slowly peel back the layers for that. So Heteru energy is just a force. It's a force of nature that is magnetism. It's attraction. It's literally what brings energy in. That's the essence of the feminine. And that's why it's expressed as beauty, because beauty attracts you, it pulls you in, right? So essentially, if she's retrograde, if this energy, this sacred feminine energy that exists within all of us is now pulling back and going in, it's calling for reflection. And it's in Secondment, which Danny just beautifully illustrated as being the heart and the essence of our purpose and our passion, and us seeking to align with what's the original thing that makes our heart beat from our childhood, right? What's that authentic dream that you had from the beginning, right? And being able to align with that and attract that into your life. So everything we've been going through has essentially been pulling us in and pulling us back and revealing to us what we need to see, so that we could have the courage, so we could have the heart to move forward and to deepen our connections, because Heteru also dictates relationships, especially female relationships, and how our connections, our relationships, and what we attract to us may not be aligned with what is in our hearts. So that's what we just moved through for a couple of months now. So I think it's good for people to process what they've moved through, but you can go ahead, Danny.
I just wanted to say one thing. When you were like, Heteru is the energy of essentially knowing what is in your heart and valuing that. And I think that something with Heteru, or the Venus energy, that we all experience is wanting to find a counterpart that mirrors that same embodiment. And I think that something that we've learned in this transit, as far as what I've experienced personally and just also tuning into the collective energetically, is that with the planet shifting and the frequency of the earth shifting and all that we're experiencing as far as changes, I think a lot of people are realizing with that like Happy access, that Aquarius polar end, is that that counterpart is not just in one person, that we were never designed for there to be one specific mirror to the essence of our heart, that that essence can be found in a multitude of experiences that may not even deal with people. And that is illuminating more of understanding yourself, which is what Sekhmet has to do. Like one of the Leo lessons is self-study. So yeah, that just made me think of that.
I'm glad you said that, because really the essence of what it's actually doing is teaching us how to deepen our love for ourselves, the self-love, because ultimately we have to balance the energy within us. Like I said, all of these forces exist within us. So that counterpart, that complement within, is a reflection of everything we attract. We just talked about the attraction piece, is where you resonate. So you attract what you're putting out there, what you're feeling, what you're thinking is ultimately what you see in your reality, because vibrationally, that's what you're putting out. And I know for a lot of people that may seem abstract, but at this point, for a good number of people, and I'm sure if you're attracted here, you get that by now, right? Like everybody's pretty solid on the law of attraction. So that's just universal law. So that being said, it is essential for you to create that within yourself. All of the relationships we attract into our lives are literally a reflection of our relationship to that aspect within us. So your relationship to your own masculine energy, your relationship to your own feminine energy is going to determine what you attract in masculine relationships and feminine relationships. And again, that's not even specific to gender. It's just energetics, the active component and the receptive component of what exists within us. So if that part of us that's meant to be active and masculine is suppressed and stagnant, or if that feminine aspect is overemphasized, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is just like looking at the state of devolution, and I'll say like the degenerate aspect of humanity right now. It expresses all of these energies in its most grotesque and degenerate way. So the way that we're seeing in the world right now, beauty, magnetism, and attraction expressed is very contorted. So we're looking at people who are literally getting surgeries to transform their body. It's like very extreme, very exaggerated. Like everybody knows about like the epidemic of like BBLs, and now all of a sudden like the beauty standard is changing. So a lot, it's now even a trend to get your BBL reversed. But then what happens to all the people who have already had their botched surgeries, the people who got sick, the people who died, and the people who can't afford to reverse it, who now have these exaggerated body parts, right? All of that is a reflection of vanity, right? So you can directly associate vanity with beauty, right? Because it becomes an over obsession on your magnetism and attraction from an insecure place, which means the masculine is off balance, because the masculine side of us is what provides us with security. So if we're able to actually create that security, create that balance within our masculine, within ourselves, then we actually stimulate a healthy balance of the feminine within us. Because what we really want to cultivate and create is true, authentic beauty, which doesn't require manipulation and change, right? It's an embrace for what is, not to impose the ego and the will, again, an unhealthy expression of the masculine, right? Because yes, we need our egos. We all have egos. They're necessary for our survival, but they're not supposed to be the ruling factor of the choices and the decisions that we make, right? And override our the basic fundamentals of human existence, like your health, right? Like for you to risk your health to change the way that you look, that's obviously showing the expression of an unhealthy ego, where you now want to impose your will on how you look in the world when you came in a certain way. So the energy is really about shifting the whole energy paradigm out of that space of degeneracy, out of that space of vanity, right? Because we have these people that we put on the pillars, right? These celebrities who are seen as, you know, like the most attractive, right? The most beautiful. And that's what everyone is emulating, right? And within that, we have to look at the sense of insecurity, deep-rooted insecurity that creates a standard of beauty that requires one to manipulate and change and morph themselves, because that means you're not being authentic and you don't feel secure in your authentic natural state of being. So I feel like that's a huge aspect of looking at the beauty in the eye of the beholder, because the truth is there are people who are attracted to that because that's where they resonate, right? If you're operating within a superficial realm and a superficial reality, and that's what you constantly see, then yes, you're going to be attracted. I only want women who have fat asses, right? Like that's a resonance that is going to attract that. And then that energy resonates on that particular level, right? So that's what we're saying about beauty being in the eye of the beholder. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Danny, like just the aspect of how the energy that we've just moved through illustrates what actually attracts people in, because that's why I like looking at Heteru specifically in that context, because when we look at it as Venus and we look at just the aspect of beauty, sometimes that feels very surface level because people are oriented to beauty from a perspective of vanity.
Well, one of the first things that sparked within me when you were speaking was just like, I remember my friend, maybe a D, I don't remember, but someone told me in the past, no, maybe Nava, but in primitive times, essentially, you would attract your partner from smelling their natural pheromones. So, however they smelled throughout the days, if the smell was attractive to you naturally, you would know that that was your designated other half. And I just think about how now that's literally impossible because we put on all of these additives as far as the way that we would like to cultivate smell, which is magic in itself, right? Because you're manipulating the way that you smell in order to invoke certain reactions in people, which, you know, I feel like the aura has a smell. So if someone were to, what'd you say?
My fault. I said, and the fact of the matter is, you're not necessarily picking a smell that's like based on your own sensibility. It's usually something that's sold to you.
Exactly.
So it's not like,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
want to smell like lavender. It's like, oh, I'm going to buy this because it's Rihanna's perfume.
Right, totally different things. Yeah, because one, yeah, if you're cultivating the essential oils and things like that, that's totally different from going into Macy's and you're buying like, you know, Erica Badu has her she has an incense that smells like her vagina. Wild. But things like that are the essence of Heteru, Venus, because it is essentially magic. Magic is what is being cultivated when we are looking at things in the realm of beauty, because beauty casts a spell. And what spell work is drawing towards you what you would like to be drawn towards you. And we all have different intentions in how we go about that. But I say that to say that now it's wicked the way that it is in our society, because people want to focus more on, essentially things have been cultivated in a way where beauty can be what sustains you in life, right? Which is in our feminine essence to magnetize in that way. Absolutely. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm obviously a whole model, so that's a part of my income. But I'm saying that now is to a point where that people are becoming singular based off of their appearance, and that is providing sustenance for them, which is drawing out their humanity. And it's affecting our ability to connect with each other in ways that are absolutely necessary, because there's the form, but obviously there's the substance that creates the form. So if you're not engaging with the substance within a person, or you're not even available to share with someone your substance, that's basically how we get to points where we forget our soul. We forget our soul, we forget what drives us, what moves us, our truth, our traumas, our pains, our all of those things that make us the fullness of who we are, which is what we're talking about when we're speaking of Sekhmet. It's actually knowing your substance more than anybody else does, so that you can resonate in a way where you radiate what is inside, and what's drawn back to you from that radiance is something that truly reflects the essence of who you are. But it's difficult to do that now because, like you said, people are trying to be like the people that they see on pillars. So it's not about the substance anymore. It's about crafting the form in a certain way to get the response that you think that you want, which is what I was saying, like the spell work. Like you're literally
Yeah.
doing spell work to attract things in your life that wouldn't have naturally gravitated towards you if it were based off of the substance that's within. Because we all have our, like we're talking about the natal chart, our life path, all of these things. There are things that would align with us naturally if we're vibrating at our true, at our home frequency is what I like to call it. But instead you're focusing on crafting a certain appearance so that it looks like you're somewhere even though you don't feel like you're there actually.
Yeah, and that's a really, I'm so glad that you said all that. Very well said. Because
Thank you.
remember, everyone has to remember the energy is neutral. We're not saying that this is good or bad, right? We're just saying where the energy is moving us towards. We're in a cycle moving towards healing. So, because we're in a degenerate cycle, yeah, we have to acknowledge that things are contorted and distorted and imbalanced. And what based on what Danny just described, it's important to just recognize that, like, even with the example of the manipulation that people are having to manipulate their form to attract something they wouldn't normally attract, that in itself just shows you that that need for the manipulation is allowing you to attract something in that you want, but that thing wouldn't naturally have come to you if you didn't manipulate or change yourself. In the case of the example I used with the surgery, right? If you didn't get that surgery, then those people who you may attract now because of that, because of the way your body looks with the surgery, are not the people you would have attracted if you kept your natural body type, right? But then it's also the fact of um like wanting to look like a certain way, like you said, because I immediately thought about how, okay, you get liposuction. It's like, instead of going to the gym and working out and losing that weight, which is obviously going to take work, it's going to take pain, it's going to take tearing your muscles rebuilding themselves, right? There's a whole process and it brings you into your body. What's happening is, because the feminine is embodied, the feminine has to be centered within herself. That's what Sekhmet is. It's self-centering, not in a negative or positive way, just is, right? We don't look at the sun like, oh, the sun is so self-centered because everything revolves around it. No, it's neutral. But the essence is, you have to be centered in your body. But when you're building on and you're manipulating yourself out of insecurity, right? Because of trauma, pain, and things that are undealt with, and you escape that and you bypass that instead of doing the work to come into your body, to come into your emotions and deal with those things so that you can actually express and magnetize things to you and attract things to you that are in alignment with the truth. Instead, you've manipulated and thwarted things. So it kind of brings things off kilter, because regardless, it's not authentic. So the energy is shaking that off. It literally, like, one of my notes here, I put, it's clearing out what isn't fit with our true power, or what doesn't fit with our true power. It becomes uncomfortable, whatever these things are that are not really in alignment with where we're becoming and how we're being guided to come deeper into our truth. So it's trying to change things to set us free. And that's going to continue to happen, even though Heteru has stationed direct, right? Venus is now going direct. It doesn't have that optical illusion of retrograde right now. So that doesn't mean that we're in the clear and the energy is done. It just means now the energy is moving forward, but it still has to complete its journey through Secondment. So it means with everything we just backed and retracted on, which hopefully you were doing your reflective work and processing these things and journaling and tuning into your own energy and being self-aware. If you weren't, then this is a great time where you might want to reflect on the past couple months to see how these themes have come up for you, because they're going to continue to show themselves now. Because now the opportunities are actually going to present themselves to make sure that we integrate the lessons that our life have been trying to show us. So that means the things that our life has been trying to shake off, right? Especially wanting us to uproot things that, you know, might, where we may have misplaced our loyalties, right? The values, right, coming into question, because there's going to be a couple of aspects with this Venus, right, this heteru with Jupiter, which is Ptah, and that is in Taurus, Api, the bull energy, which is ruled by heteru, ruled by Venus. So this is an aspect of us returning back to all the work we've been doing over the past few years around our values and recognizing our worthiness. And that means it's centering us back into ourselves and just the essence of our existence being enough and being worthy, and us not needing to change in order to attract things. Trusting life and trusting that us being as we are will attract what we're worthy of, instead of wanting what's being projected onto us by society. Because we do have to recognize that we're in a situation where the culture and the societal standards and values are corrupt. So if we allow that to guide us, then ultimately we're corrupting our souls. Were you going to say something, Danny?
I was agreeing with you. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that just to like bring all the energies together too, I think that this is so important, as we've just, I mean, it's retrograding in Capricorn now, but we're going to get back to Aquarius. Pluto being there, you know, the power is going to be returned to the people, or at least that's going to be the fight. That's the transit. So it's like, what are we going to do with that power if we don't know what power we have ourselves? And it shows that we don't know our power when we compromise our truth for connection. Like, there's literally too many people out here to do that. But it does take having value for yourself more than anything, value for your fulfillment, value
And
for your joy, courage, yes, in order for you to do those things.
Yeah, and you made me just think about that access again with the happy energy with Aquarius. One of the lower expressions of that energy is like wanting to fit in, right? Instead of wanting to or being fine with standing out, the energy wants to fit in. And that is one of the key things that we have to be aware of and careful with, because energetically we may want to compromise ourselves and our own integrity and our own values and the truth and authenticity of who we are, because we're afraid, right? That fear of not fitting in. So that's why the Secondment energy has been working to strengthen our hearts, so we have the courage to confront or embrace that fear in order to face the reality of, I'm worthy just as I am, and to trust that and to be unapologetic about that. And yes, it's easier said than done, but ultimately we're all being called deeper in honoring what's in our hearts, which means we have to be true and we have to show up in the world as we are. And not feeling like we need to censor ourselves, not feeling like we need to dim our light to be around other people, but also not moving too much in arrogance and ego as well. There's a humility aspect depending on where you are on the scale, right? So you have to be able to evaluate that for yourself, because we're all in different journeys. And we each, because of our own star prints, right? Our natal chart, our birth chart is going to show different energy dispositions for each of us. So that affects the way that the energy shows up for us in particular. So it's not going to be the same for any of us. The themes that are highlighted depending on the house placement, right? Or if we have any planets in those specific energies, when we move through these transits, those things get activated and amplified. So that's what tunes you to how exactly the energy is going to affect you. When you look at the house placement, it's going to tell you what aspect of your life is going to be impacted by the energy. So I do want to encourage people who are interested in doing astrological consultation with Danny to tune in, because she actually goes into detail around that. If you're just looking for a general guide, like ancestral guidance, spiritual guidance in terms of where to go in your journey, not, a tarot reading or a predictive reading, because that's not how I function. It's more like oracle guidance, life guidance using ancestral symbolism. I also provide the natal chart there, but it's just a basic, natal chart because I'm doing the reading virtually. So I do want to touch on some of the things that are here in the chat. Welcome, Mercurial Lure. Always great to have you consistently in the house. So I want to touch on this question that you put on here while we're waiting on Danny to return back. Don't know if agriculture is a natural phenomenon, but I'm curious, aside from your course, how is Happy a manifestation within the pantheon of said phenomenon when it comes to that of Isis, which is Ast, or Ma'at? I feel like I'm going to need you to clarify this question. If what I'm comprehending is correct, how is Happy, which is Aquarius energy, a manifestation within the pantheon when it comes to that of Ast and Ma'at? So when we're looking at the different energies, specifically the Neteru, these are natural forces and principles. So the best way for us to comprehend them is literally to turn to nature. For me, the vast majority of sacred knowledge and wisdom that I carry, it comes from my life as a farmer, from my connection to nature, from being in the mountains for 3 years and being initiated by my ancestors to literally tune into nature and be present with nature to that degree. So the first thing we want to look at is the symbolism of each, because that's what connects us to the energy. For me, I'm not trying to make you come to me as the guide. I'm trying to guide you within yourself so that you're able to connect with the energy, because anyone can read information and gather information and knowledge. It's different when it's applied. It becomes wisdom when you actually connect with the energy. And that's the point. The point is for us to embody the energy. That's the shift of us going from a Eurocentric interpretation to the original African interpretation, which is holistic, because the whole point is to embody the energy. We didn't look at them as gods and goddesses. These were not deities outside of us. These are forces of nature that we are actually accountable to and with and for as stewards of nature, as the original people of the planet, the original farmers and gardeners. So when you talk about agriculture, I immediately think about Hapi, because Hapi is the raw source or resource par excellence, because it's literally the energy and the essence of what allowed our ancestors to create surplus in the Hapi Valley, right? In the Nile Valley. Because remember, the Hapi is the Nile. It's the water bearer. And it was literally the inundation of the Nile, the flooding of the Nile each year is what created the abundance to be able to grow and farm and cultivate food. So I know I touched on this probably in another episode. It might have actually been in the Professor and Priestess talk show with Mama Regina. But it's important for us to recognize that the agriculture is the foundation of civilization as we know it today, because due to agriculture and the story of Ast, right, which you have here in the Greek interpretation of Isis, but I'm going to use the word Ast because I like to make sure that we're using our original language and the African terms for, or African vibrations for these energies, because it's all about vibration. So when we look at Ast and Asar being the first leaders of Kemet, they were the first ones to come to the people and teach the people how to farm, right? After what was known as a great cataclysm that took place that destroyed the previous civilization, they had to carry that knowledge and bring it to the people who survived. And of course, they have to go to the source of water, right? Because water is the essence of life, the primordial energy, Nu, right? So we had to go to the water because we need water to sustain life on this planet. So every time the Hapi would flood, you had this flood of water, but what did we have to do ancestrally? We had to carve waterways and canals and and channels, right, to guide the water to specific places. So when the flood came, it didn't just destroy everything. The water was literally guided through channels and canals, currents. So this is the essence of currency, right? You prepare for the flood. You have to cultivate the channels, the canals, the waterways, and the storage facilities for the flood when it comes. And we can say it's water, but remember, it's symbolic. Water usually symbolizes spiritually emotions in the emotional realm. So we're talking about a flood of emotion or a flood of resources, right? Are you ready for them? Are you organized? Do you have everything in place and prepared for that? So that's what I see the essence of Hapi. Now, that's a natural principle that was not necessarily personified in the way that Ast and Ma'at are personified. Like you literally see a woman in both of those. And each of them also have counterparts. You have Ma'at has the complement of Tehuti, and you have Ast has the complement of Asar. So they each have a masculine counterpart. The reason why they're personified as human form is because the way that that energy manifests is more tangible and more human, right? These are qualities and characteristics that we can embody, right? So I hope that that explains it a little bit. A society based and inceptions on trauma can't be considered normal. Yeah, well, what we're dealing with right now is we're dealing with a society where we have an oppositional force that's because everything in nature, right? In this realm, we have the light and the dark. We have up and down. We have left and right. We have masculine and feminine. We have push and pull. Everything has this complementary energy force, right? This sexual energy that's constantly spiraling to create the whole expression that we have. So that oppositional force that's present, it is trying to normalize trauma. And it is trying to get us to accept the cycles and recycle the trauma. So that is something that we do have to be careful with because it's regular. It's becoming regular because it's being perpetuated and it's being put out there and broadcast, but it's not normal, right? Something being regular doesn't mean that that's normal. But you, again, you have to have a value system in order to determine what you would think is normal. Welcome back, Annie.
Hello.
I'm just going through some of the questions on here. So we can go on to this one. I'm a Taurus and I resonate with everything y'all are speaking about. Last couple of months for me have been a lot of introspection and knowing my worth and being true to me and living my truth. Well, welcome, Keisha. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad that everything resonated with you as well. And it's interesting that you are Taurus, which is Api, the bull energy. Do you want to comment on this comment from Keisha, Danny?
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like just all around Taurus and Libra placements are. So when I look at the transits, as far as what people have in their natal chart, I look at those people as the embodiment of the cosmic forces for the collective to look at as a reference. So people with Taurus and Libra placements have been learning a lot, and I say this because the North Node just came out of Taurus, and now the South Node is in Libra. So there's this Venus and Mars opposition that we've been looking at collectively and exploring different ways to engage with it. And I think that Tauruses are learning a lot about how their value systems can shift You know, Taurus is the fixed earth, so it's like the sturdiest energy. It doesn't want to move, it prefers to stay in place. And that can manifest in a lot of different ways. And in the sun, that can be in your actions and your outlook, in the way that you want to utilize the energy that you have to make moves. You want to do it your own way based off of the value system you've always had. You want to cultivate the sustenance from that value system. So I think Tauruses are learning a lot about how their value systems don't have to be fixated, how it can be adjustable and they're still going to be okay internally.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about that Api energy, right? That Taurus energy is one, that energy for me is about to be like really exalted right now with this energy we're moving through. So my midheaven, which means the top of my chart, is has a significant Taurus placement. My Venus is in Taurus. So my Heteru is in Taurus, which is the ruler of that energy. So it's at home there. And it's interesting because Jupiter is there and Jupiter expands anything. That's Ptah, right? So it's this creative force that wants to make more of it. So that being said, I wanted to speak on one of the aspects through my life that how I've naturally engaged with it. Because like Danny said, like we become the embodiment in the collective of the energy in the material world, right? Because of the way the energy interacts and the way that we embody it. So for me, I had to learn that the beauty of the Api energy, right? Because my father is Api, Taurus. He's a triple Taurus. And I would always say, "Oh, my father's super stubborn," and yes, he is stubborn. He exhibits the energy in an unhealthy extreme, but that's exactly what it's supposed to be. Because I always think about how my father being exactly who he is why I am who I am. Because my dad being who he is and having so much fixed energy, even though it was to an extreme and it was overemphasized, it created a conviction in me that is one of my strongest character traits and values, to be convicted in what I know, and then going through my journey, it's coming through, like, again, the worthiness piece that you're speaking on, Keisha, is like just being clear that the gift that I have of my intuitive intelligence, my psychic ability, that is what I have to be convicted in. But I had to go through many cycles and a lot of rebirths and different experiences to prove to myself, oh no, you know, you know. So trusting that, and then we have one other question here I wanted to touch on. Keisha did respond to that. Absolutely. Give thanks. Thank you for your comments, sis. So I wanted to clarify here for mercurial lore. I guess I'm trying to clarify who is who. If Hapi is a theme currently and its association of the Nile River, how does that relate to the current phenomenon of Venus? Perfect. So I can actually clarify this, and then you can definitely add to it, Danny, if you have anything to add. The reason why this is a great question, so I'm glad you did that, because I'm glad you asked it, because it's very important that people make the connection. Because for the two of us, it's natural because like we're very aware of this, but we're also teaching, so it's important to ground the energy and make sure you get how everything connects. So the Hapi, or the Nile River, right? The energy of Hapi, it's not the energy of just the Nile River. It's the force of nature that is the current. It is the river. It's emphasized and embodied the same way that we just said Sister Keisha is embodying that Taurus energy, right? That Api energy. Distinction between Api and Hapi. Hapi is the river. Api is the bull. So, but she's an embodiment of that. The Nile River is an embodiment of the energy of currency, right? And the flow of the river, because it's the longest river on the planet. It's a distinct river on the planet. And for us ancestrally, in the culture that created this tradition, that observed nature for thousands of years, that was the main water source, right? So that being said, the reason why we're connecting it energetically here is because we're talking about Venus being in Leo, right? So we're using the Kemetic terms. So we're talking about Venus is Heteru, and Heteru is in Secondment, that's Leo. Secondment doesn't exist isolated. It's on an axis of energy. And the other side of that, the other side of the coin of secondment is Happy, Aquarius energy. So the reason why we have to look at that is because that's still there. That energy is still influencing us. Not to mention, as we said before, it's 360 degrees. Even if an energy is not emphasized in a particular moment, it's always there, it's always present. And you always want to have a holistic perspective when we're going to ancient astrology. So you're not just going to look at one part, you're going to look at the whole spectrum, you're going to look at the whole axis. So we can't talk about Secondment or Leo without talking about Happy, which is Aquarius. So that's why we started talking about that energy in particular. In addition to that, I want to connect it to Aust because you also asked about Aust, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we lost Danny again. So the other way that it relates to Aust energy is we're in Virgo season, right? And Virgo is Aust. It's symbolized by the maiden. And it's also symbolized astronomically by the rising of Sirius, the star. And the Sirius rising on the eastern horizon and coming into prominence is directly connected to the inundation of the Hapi, the flooding of the Nile, because it marked the beginning of the astrological, the farming season and bringing us into harvest and being able to actually have the abundance of the land, right? Because once the river floods, like I said, it brings the flow of water that nurtures the land, nourishes the land, and provides the sustenance for the people to eat and live. So that's how it's connected to Aust, because that star point is literally marking the rise into the harvest season. It marks the flooding of the Hapi, and once it comes to prominence, it becomes the harvest season. And the interesting thing about that is here where I am, that star, Sabu Septa or Septet, which is associated with Aust, with Virgo, which the sun is currently in Virgo. We're in Virgo season, so we're in Aust season. When it rose was when we were sowing the land here in Cabo Verde on the west coast of Africa. It brought our rain season, and currently it's rising. And by the time it reaches peak prominence, we're going to be in our harvest season. So it's still associated with the same energetics. It's still associated with the flooding and the abundance and the current flowing, and the abundance that is provided from that when you cultivate the land and when you irrigate the land, you get to have a harvest from that. So that being said, I hope Danny will join us back, but if not, I'll probably close out today's session without her. If you have any final questions or comments and you're here with us live, please feel free to drop them in the chat because we're pretty much going to wrap up today's episode, right? So if there aren't any other burning questions, we're going to wrap up because I think we did lose Danny. Because I know she was in transit. It's New York Fashion Week. So she is working and she's in the city. So I know. All right. And I don't see any questions coming in here. So I want to thank everybody who came and all of you who are here with us live. And if you are watching the raw play, thank you for tuning in and for staying through to the end. I hope that you'll join us for our next session, which is going to be not this Wednesday, but the next one. And thank you, Mercurial Lord. I just saw your comment. So thank you for being consistent and always being present with us. We appreciate your energy always. And again, if you want to support Tehuti Ma'at and learn more about the work that we do in our community service, you can check out tehutimaat.org. And if you want to support us directly, we do ask that you support our services and book a reading. You can also purchase some of the spiritual tools in our marketplace. Other members of the Tehuti Militia are also on there who have created other spiritual tools on there. We have the oil blends, and crystals on there as well. And if you do have any other questions, you can always email us at grow@tehutima'at.org, or you can text 646-883-MAAT. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your night and that you take the space and time to really reflect on how this Heteru retrograde has affected your relationships, your connections, your value, and your courage and your relationship to what's in your heart, and brought you clarity on what your heart truly desires. And as we continue to move through this energy, we're going to have some significant transits with Shu, which is the energy known as Uranus or Uranus. And that's going to bring a lot of a wave of change and opportunity to shift things to align us with our heart's desires. And we're also going to have significant aspects with this Heteru energy with the energy of Jupiter, Ptah, which is going to really expand and be a very supportive energy because it is going to be in Api, Taurus, which is ruled by Heteru, Venus. So this energy is going to be very supportive of making sure that things do align with us to support us in really connecting us to true love, and that begins within ourselves. So remember, always go within and you'll never go without, right? So seek that love from within yourself and you'll attract it externally as well. So thank you again. I love you all and I hope you have a beautiful night. Power.